What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/TalesOfNeckbeards. Alright, today's one story is a long one. It's called My Neckbeard Boyfriend. Long post. This is my first post, but the title says it all. I dated a neckbeard. If you love a hot cup of tea, please brew a pot and enjoy the highlights of this affair that I try hard to forget. Long story incoming, but if you're a fan of cringe, you're sure to savor every moment. This isn't your average neckbeard. He was extremely skinny, showered regularly, and didn't have a beard. But don't be fooled, the true colors were there, and they were shown. This guy was my childhood friend going back as early as I can remember. We had good times as kids, lost touch after elementary school, then reconnected my senior year. I remembered him fondly and was glad to have him in my class. Eventually, he asked me on a date, and since I had never been on one, I said yes. We had a good time grabbing dinner and then going to the school musical. The neckbeard began showing almost immediately. Unfortunately for me, growing up being told that nice guys should just have a chance, I swept stuff under the rug that would be troubling down the line. For some context, his parents were pretty wealthy, and they provided him with an allowance of however much money he asked for, whenever he wanted it. Keep that in mind for later. To start off, he always insisted on paying for me during dates, to the point that even when I firmly stated that I'd like to pay for myself because I don't want to feel like I owe my date anything, he said we wouldn't leave until I let him. He stated that he didn't feel right making a woman pay for her share of the date. I didn't like this, but shrugged it off as his choice if he demanded on shelling out money for me. This ideology spread to things that got increasingly more on my nerves. I came over to his house one morning for breakfast and we decided to have sandwich. He refused to let me make my own sandwich, saying a lady shouldn't have to. At first, it was a cute little joke, and then as my laughs tapered off and I went to get a knife to spread my peanut butter, he took the jar away from me and wouldn't give it back until I gave him the knife so he could put it on my sandwich himself. I told him no, that I wanted to do it so I could make sure I get the proportions right, and he adamantly refused. I was annoyed at this point and told him to come on and to give me the jar. Again, he refused. I became embarrassed at the thought of being the psycho girlfriend who had a fit over a sandwich, so I relented and gave in, excusing his behavior once again as him just trying to be nice. After about 2 months, he started trying to get frisky with me. I wasn't ready for intimacy yet and told him so outright, but said I was fine doing lighter things like kissing and cuddling. He would say okay, but pout a ton and act sad the entire time, and revisit the topic constantly, at one point giving a tug on my shirt to pull it up so he could see my chest. I stopped him right there and told him if he ever did anything like that ever again, it was over and I was telling everyone in charge of his life exactly what he did. He seemed genuinely frightened and apologetic and backed off immediately. I excused it as him getting carried away and making an honest mistake. There was a time I asked him if he would be open to trimming every once in a while as he was extremely hairy and it made cuddling itchy and uncomfortable at times. He responded with, "Why would I do that? I'm a guy." I replied that regardless of sex, being an absolute wild forest of hair was a little gross, and just a small trim to keep it from spilling out of his sleeves and shedding surely wouldn't be the end of the world. He refused again, citing that guys don't do that stuff. I rolled my eyes at his assumption that no man on earth grooms himself, but knew I couldn't tell him what to do with his body, and ultimately it was his choice. A little while later, he began to show more of his true self. He was obsessed with Magic the Gathering and had an absolutely huge collection. So I, trying to engage his interest, suggested we go on a date to his favorite comic book store and he could show me the cool stuff they had. We went in and I enjoyed looking at the figurines, books, and many board games and toys. We were only there about 10 minutes when he told me we were leaving. I asked why and he didn't really answer, but was clearly upset. After he dropped me home, I texted him asking for an explanation. He stated that he was ashamed of his childish hobby and that he wished he hadn't taken me there. I was surprised at this, but assured him that it wasn't childish to enjoy Magic and that I liked the store. He pouted. From this point on in our relationship, he would oscillate between being very confident and almost cocky to extremely insecure and self-loathing. One day he would say he was was going and attending a new club just for the sake of meeting new people, beaming with pride and subtly complimenting himself on his own social skills. And the next minute, he was deep in the dumps. During these times, he would regularly proclaim that he was giving up magic, and I would tell him that I supported his choice but wished he would allow himself to do the things he enjoys. After each of these proclamations, he would inevitably slip back into playing again and then express more shame and self-loathing that he just couldn't stop. I tried to tell him there was nothing wrong with liking it, but he continued to despair over how unattractive and unmanly it was, despite the fact that I, a girl, didn't think either of those things. After trying to quit magic didn't work, he attempted to bolster his ego by becoming vegan. Yes, one of those vegans. He asked me to do it with him, and I declined, but told him that I supported him and was glad he found a movement he enjoyed. He barked back that you couldn't support vegans unless you were one. You were with them or against them. Well, I guess I'm against you then. Sorry, I'm still happy for you. He was shocked at this. I'm your boyfriend! How can you be okay with this? He cried. I don't feel like I'm against you, I replied. But if you think that way, I can't change your mind. I don't want to change my whole lifestyle just because you say so. Does doing that sound fair to you? No, he grumbled. I asked him if things were alright between us, and he reluctantly said yes. They weren't, however, and the following time he would bug me to go vegan again and again, saying, just do it for a day, just do it for a week. Why do you insist on being part of the genocide? Eventually, I agreed to try going vegan for a couple of days. It was fine, but I didn't enjoy it. He asked me how I felt afterwards, and I told him as such. He was floored that trying the diet for a few days didn't magically change my mind. He pleaded with me. Just give me a few hours one day and we'll talk about all the benefits. Your mind will absolutely be changed by then. At this point, I was very tired of his antics, but because he seemed so upset, I agreed to hear him out. But I warned him not to assume I would change my mind. He said okay. We spent a few hours discussing the ethics, statistics, the environment, and health. Afterwards, I thanked him for sharing his information with me, but said I'd still decided I wasn't interested at this point. He was shattered. How can you say that after everything I just told you? He wailed. I hear you, and I think you made a lot of important points. I'm just not interested. But you're so kind, so gentle. How could you be okay with committing this genocide? This isn't the you I know. You're such a sweet girl. He hung his head in disbelief, as if I was betraying him to his very core. I didn't appreciate the comments about me being a cookie-cutter sweet little girlfriend. I'm not interested. That's my reason. I'm sorry, but I'm just not. I tried to wrap up the conversation. If you don't care about the animals, care about yourself. You're so beautiful. Do you want to be dead by 50 from cancer? At this point, I was offended. This neckbeard was extremely spoiled, and his mom did everything for him. He regularly broke his vegan diet because she refused to change up the meals she made for the whole family just for his sake, and he wouldn't cook anything for himself. There was no reason he couldn't, he just didn't want to. I called him out on this and asked why he was all over me when he couldn't practice what he preached. He mumbled something inaudible and shifted uncontrollably. Fine, he said. We don't have to talk about it again. From here, our relationship was less enjoyable. He continued to act more and more like a neckbeard. At one point, I mentioned in passing how even though I don't really like my surname, I don't think I would change it upon marriage because it's my identity. He scoffed and said, what? Of course, I don't think a lady should have to change her name, but what if your in-laws wanted you to? I responded by saying that was their issue. He said that a new bride should be considerate of her husband's family's values. I told him that if he felt that way, I'd send him to my grandparents' church. He, a proud abstainer of religion, became huffy about this and quickly changed the subject. Several days later, I suggested our next date should be to the local ice skating rink. I mentioned to him that I had an awesome coupon that let us get skates for really cheap. He sighed in relief, said, finally, I don't have to drain my wallet of all the money I have. I stopped, confused, and asked him what he meant, citing that he insisted on paying for me every date, and that he knew I always came with enough to pay for myself anyways. I also brought up that it wasn't his money, it was his parents, who gave him however much he wanted. I know. He backpedaled and ushered me into the car, eager to turn the radio up loud. I let it go, but didn't forget. Not long after this, I became tired of the relationship. I was bored and displeased with his bouts of insecurity where he trashed himself for his nerdy pleasures. I was tired of the vegan attitude and his absolute demand for gentleman etiquette, which he would then whine about later, like having to pay for me on all dates. I was tired of his dedication to manhood, resulting in him refusing to groom himself or address me properly. He had begun calling me his goddess for the last month or so, even after I repeatedly told him I didn't like when he did that. He insisted that he had to because it was the only way for him to properly pay homage to my grace and beauty. Barf. I broke it off with him and he seemed disappointed but assured me it was alright and that he was just as committed to remaining friends as I was given our long history. It didn't last long. He began to have fits of grumpiness around me for no reason. I asked him if there was anything he wanted to clear the air with me about and he said no and promised everything was fine. He kept calling me dear and darling after we had broken up and I let it slide for a couple of weeks because I assumed he was still adjusting to the relationship being over. Eventually, it became very embarrassing when he did in front of my friends, who were weirded out and confused, and I texted him politely but firmly, telling him he needed to only address me by my name. He snapped that I don't control what he does, and I retorted that that was fine because I had no problem with cutting him off if he wouldn't respect my boundaries. He panicked and told me he was sorry and that he would stop. Eventually, after a few long months of tension, prom was approaching. As we had been together when our prom attendance group had been formed, it was me and my friends with him tagging along, we all agreed he could still come with us out of courtesy. That was until one day he exploded out of the blue into the prom group chat about how much he resented me and how much of a bench I was for dumping him when he gave me his heart and his soul, and how he couldn't understand how I left when he was ready to do anything for me. He said many hurtful things and things went down in flames right after he finished. Two of my friends immediately went in on him and texted him privately about how unacceptable and terribly he had acted, while the rest of us buried his messages in normal conversation to resume the peace. He immediately began furiously apologizing and groveling to them, to which neither of them cared. He texted me saying how sorry he was and I told him I didn't care either and blocked his number. He then switched from being helplessly sorry to angry again and wrote out a massive rant, texting it to my friend and ordering her to forward it to me since I had blocked his number. He sulked off when she said no. The next day, he was removed from the group chat. Upon coming to school, he cornered one of the shy and non-confrontational girls in our group and asked if surely it was okay if he still went with us, right? He had to see me so we could make up. He mentioned how he did act out, but of course the group didn't entirely blame him since they all knew it was partially my fault, right? Because I just pissed him off so much. She stuttered out a reason to leave and fled the conversation without answering, telling us he made her so scared and uncomfortable she wasn't going to prom if he was going to be there in our group. At that point, we had had enough and my best friend got the school involved. She set up a meeting with a counselor where he was called in to discuss the events. It ended with the school telling him he was banned from approaching me or my friends in school or at prom, and they even forced him to sign a contract saying he wouldn't. He began to cry about how he can't go on without me and he needs to make it right. The counselor told him he can't force a relationship with the girl, and he kept repeating how he won't accept that he lost me and begging her to just tell him what to do to make it right. The counselor ended up telling him his inability to respect my boundaries was very concerning, and she referred him to professional help. Yikes. He ignored all of us at the prom and spent most of the time on the balcony, not talking to anyone, just looking into the distance forlornly. Yikes again. Thankfully, after that, I never saw him again, as graduation came up quick, and I hope I never do. And so ends our tale. Thankfully, I have a shiny spine and a lot more knowledge now, and hopefully won't make a mistake with a neckbeard like him again. Thanks for tuning in so long. I hope all you cringe junkies enjoyed the tale. Fingers crossed, I won't have to write on this subreddit again. Okay, first off, I can understand the wanting to pay for your date or whatever and wanting to make them their food or whatever, but if they're insisting that they want to pay or they want to do it themselves, then you gotta listen to them. In my opinion, whoever invites the other person, like the inviter, they pay for the date. That's how it's been with me. And I feel like that works because, you know, you're not basically saying, oh, you're incapable of paying for yourself, and can't be taken that way. And this dude, it clearly thinks he's a lot older and more mature than he is, and he really needs to just kind of grow up. And also, I'm not sure if this is really a neckbeard. I mean, there were some neckbeard elements, like, okay, this guy's kind of like Skyrim, okay? People say Skyrim's not an RPG, but it's got some RPG elements. So this guy is to neckbeard as Skyrim is to an RPG. There we go. But yeah, this guy definitely has issues. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.